Oh, good evening. This is, I can't believe I'm saying this in public, the Punisher, PUN.Isher on TikTok. And these are all the terrible jokes, dad jokes, and things that my wife is tired of hearing. I asked my wife, did you know that Malawi gin has the ability to grant 3 wishes? She asked me, how can you possibly mistake gin, the alcohol, with gin as in genie? I was like, if you really think about it, they are both spirits in a bottle. Today, I actually would have woken up late, but my wife woke me up. I guess that makes her alaman. I asked my wife, have you noticed that a lot of food as raw ingredients are harmful? Koma mugazipika zimakhala bwino bwino. Mushrooms, raw mushrooms can be poisonous. Mugazipika zabwino bwino. Fish, if you eat it raw, you get salmonella. Mugazipika jambo. Pork, you eat raw pork, you get trichinosis. Mugazipika, you get bacon. Nsima, if you cook it, ndizabwino bwino. Koma if you eat it raw, ufa. I asked my wife, did you know that if you combine blue and yellow, you get green? You combine red and yellow, you get orange. You combine red and blue, you get purple. If you mix nothing at all, as in no colors, then you get white. If you mix all the colors, you get black. Perhaps that's why we call charcoal magala. I told my wife, I met a Rasta who had arthritis. I asked him, is it painful? He was like, nah. If you think about it, whether it's kusura jamba or arthritis, they're both inflaming joints. I told my wife, I think the super glue has expired. She asked me, how can you tell? I was like, it doesn't really matter. I told my wife, did you know that the LGBTQ community in Malawi never burps? She was like, that doesn't make sense. What do you think happens if they drink too quickly? I was like, I'm a gayer. I told my wife, a Black Panther ajarundi anzanga. I'm a Kalaba Jidedze. She was like, that doesn't make sense. Black Panther doesn't live in Jidedze. I was like, no. I'm a Kala, but Jidedze. Kona mavakuyabwa. And that's why Wakanda forever. My wife told me, you need to stop making all these food puns. I was like, Pepper. She was like, this is exactly what I mean. I'm trying to tell you something important. I was like, Pepper. Gamba. I told my wife, economy is really bore. I'm thinking of starting a side hustle as an electrician/hairdresser. She was like, that doesn't make sense. Mozitani. And I was like, this is manga, my extension. I told my wife, Kavena side hustle ina, this is gulisa ngombe, komaza second hand. I'll call it kaunjiga. I told my wife, I accidentally spilled some cooking oil in my ears. She was like, Pepper, I say. Do you have an ear infection? Does it hurt? I was like, nah. Ndikumva kukoma. I told my wife, did you know that the hotter you are, the more jealous people get? I'm sure you can relate. She was like, what's your point? I was like, do you think that's why the hottest region in Malawi is in Sanje? I told my wife, I have a friend, Kondwani, who has made 18 videos on the coronavirus. And if he makes just one more video, it will be COVID-19. I told my wife, ndimadusa pansika, nde wamisala ndigenda with some pigeon peas. She asked me, are you hurt? I was like, nah, sawawa. I asked my wife, at the beginning of the year, when I asked you who your celebrity crush is, machida kuimba kuti Aaron, Pierre. But now your birthday is coming up and you want chocolate and flowers. Then ndukufusani. Mufasa. I told my wife, it's funny how we started out as friends and now we're married. She was like, it's not really that strange. A good romance starts with friendship. I was like, true, true. But a bad romance starts with Rama, ulala, gaga, ulala. I told my wife, John, the procurement officer, died last night. She was like, Sha, so sudden. What happened? Anabanga ngozi. And I was like, nah, analindi matenda. I told that my wife, I was watching Guardians of the Galaxy last night, and to my surprise, I saw a Malawian in there. She was like, oh yeah, the black guy. I was like, nah, Mr. Kambewa. Or you might know him as Chris Pratt. My wife told me, stay away from British women. I was like, Blanche, Mwopa aku London. I told my wife, did you know that Iron Man doesn't hire a nanny? She was like, that doesn't make sense. He has a young daughter. I was like, yes. Komaye on the babysitter. I told my wife, did you know that P. Diddy, Ndiwa Seventh Day? She was like, hey, come on now. Those are respectable people. I was like, yes, I know they're respectable people. But his name is Sean Combs. Obviously, Ndimpesa. I told my wife, did you know that they're developing a lotion that if you rub on your shoulder, it's male contraceptive? True story, by the way. She was like, what's it called? I was like, I actually forgot what it's called. But if for me, I would call it sunblock. I told my wife, did you know that Toyota is making a car specifically for farmers? Alimiife. She was like, oh yeah, the Range Rover. I was like, nah, Toyota Corolla. I told my wife, ndabwera ku holiday. She was like, yes, you're in Kenya. Manene pako. I was like, oh, nde maonera jani? And she was like, Masai. I told my wife, I was sitting next to this colored guy who was vaping, and he kept blowing smoke in my face. She was like, did you confront him? I was like, yeah, komanandi shisha. I told my wife, a Catholic priest cured my COVID. She was like, oh, how did he do it? I was like, he grabbed me around the neck and squeezed as hard as he could. She was like, that worked? I was like, yes. Anafinya corona. I told my wife, I hear they're making a new Power Rangers movie. Koma Atakalamba. It will be called Gogo Power Rangers. I told my wife, remember a couple of years ago when those phones would spontaneously combust and catch flames? She was like, yeah, the Samsung. I was like, nah, Motorola. I told my wife, when you're sticking things together with glue, muzionesesa kuti mavala mask. She was like, I say waonjeza. Kumata ako, I was like, no, muzivala kumaso. I told my wife, the economy isn't great. I hear even butterflies are losing their homes due to excessive loans. She was like, ngongole antundu wanje. I was like, caterpillar. I slammed my door and I asked my wife, do you have any painkillers? She was like, Bunch, Panado? I was like, yeah. How did you know?
Okay, guys, that was the Punisher. I say, Kapani just say means punchlines because the guy was on fire, dropping punchlines, but you already know. So, guys, don't forget to subscribe, like, and always engage to our content, guys. And this was Geoff, and this was Podcastmalawi. And we out.